You're listening to the #1 podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast.
It blows my mind that people work so hard, prepare for months for an event, even years, and they get all the way to the end and they don't ask.
They weren't exactly following our advice. They were kind of fighting with us on some stuff. They didn't apply everything, and as a result, they did poorly.
Now, that could come in a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
When we say they don't ask, they may actually, in their mind, think they're asking,
Yeah, right.
but they really aren't.
Yeah.
And things just get so carried away, and they panic, and they just think that this whole thing is going to be osmosis, that
I'm telling you telepathically what I'm wanting you to do, but I'm not actually saying it.
Right. Because if I say it, my head will explode. And so, it's just unbelievable.
Welcome back to another episode of the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. We are so excited to have you join us today. We've got a great episode lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about 7 mistakes people make while making an appeal at a fundraising event. And Jim, this is something that over 2,500 appeals in the bank.
Right.
I think you know something about mistakes that people make when giving an appeal. In fact, one of the biggest things that people call you in for is, how do we improve the appeal?
Right.
My name is Jason Galasinski, and this is my co-host, Jim Dempsey.
Hi, Jason.
Together, we have over 60 years of collective development experience. And today, we're going to be talking about events, fundraising events.
Yep.
Specifically, we're going to probably more focus on like banquets or galas or dinners types of events, because that's where a lot of our appeals tend to happen.
Right.
Let's get into the 7 mistakes that people make when giving an appeal.
In an event,
The first mistake is the most obvious of them all.
Right. They don't actually do an appeal. Yeah.
Wow.
It blows my mind that people work so hard, prepare for months for an event, even years, and they get all the way to the end and they don't ask. Now, that could come in a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
When we say they don't ask, they may actually, in their mind, think they're asking, but they really aren't.
Yeah.
And things just get so carried away, and they panic, and they just think that this whole thing is going to be osmosis, that through everything in the event, that people just love the testimonies, love the speakers enough that the money is going to just
like this.
It's just going to flow out.
I'm telling you telepathically what I'm wanting you to do, but I'm not actually saying it.
Right. Because if I say it, my head will explode. And so, it's just unbelievable.
Well, and a lot of other types of events. I mean, there's that telepathic. I'm trying, but also like ticketed events.
Yes.
People. You buy tickets to an event, and then they just entertain you, and that's it.
Yes,
and it's
that's
like,
right.
In fact, I've gone to some of these in the past where there's like a chili cook-off or a bake sale or something, and it's like, come support the local chapter of blank,
or
and
fire department or whatever.
And we're gonna have a chili cookout, and you go and you pay $15 for a bowl of chili, and then they just have entertainment. You sit down, you mingle with a few people, and you leave.
Right,
and that's it.
That's right. Yeah,
and maybe if you're lucky, someone might get up and thank you for supporting them, and maybe if you're lucky, they might talk about themselves a little, but they don't want to be too. They're so afraid, to be, asking for money, so they don't even want to appear that they're asking for money, and that's a huge mistake.
It is,
for raising support, especially if you're calling it a fundraiser,
Oh yeah,
just like, man.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
If you're going to do an appeal, you actually have to ask for money. Right. So the second mistake that people make is that they actually do an appeal. They don't really ask for money. So how do you do an appeal and not ask for money?
Yeah, it's really weird. And what they tend to do is, which a lot of churches kind of went through this phase for a while where they just kind of leave a basket or a bucket out at the end, a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket or something, and just assume that people are going to see that and go, "Oh, honey, let's write a $20,000 check while we're standing here at the doorway and there's 50 other people behind us trying to get out." It just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. You at least are able to kind of get over the hump a little bit to at least talk about money, but you don't complete the task, and completing the task is so important. It's like you get right up to the goal line if I'm using a sports analogy, but you decide you're going to all of a sudden just go sit down on the bench rather than taking the ball over into the end zone.
Now, the reason why when I was saying they do an appeal, and I was saying appeal with quotes, if you can't see me, the reason why I was saying that is because it's not really an appeal.
No,
They kind of the way that really plays out practically is something to the effect of they make people feel guilty, or they kind of allude to the fact that they need something, or they talk about how they need a certain amount of money to keep the lights on. And it's very like elusive. There's not really a clear picture.
Well, they didn't say we'd be interested in a gift of $25 or $50 or $100, or they don't say, "Would you please give," or stop to have them fill out an envelope or anything.
Right. I mean, I think people feel awkward about it because I think they're thinking about it the wrong way.
Oh, yes.
So you and I often talk about being blessings brokers or opportunity brokers, meaning that we're not thinking about the problem of, how do we make people give us money? Because that involves, well, how do we trick them, or how do we guilt them into, giving us money? Instead, we just think, well, if we present the opportunities and they're compelling opportunities and they're actually going to make a difference, then letting God work on their heart and see what they do. Right. So,
well, this really comes down to mindset, Jason. And I think at the end, you'll probably address an area that we offer, which is called development basics. But one of the mindset things is that people look at development as a necessary evil. I don't want to have to talk about this dirty topic of fundraising, and I'd rather not have to do this. But I know if I want to get my budget, I need to at least do something. And so you're 100% right. I mean, it's the mindset, it's the way that people look at this, it's the way they think about it, and it really is a mistake because they back into it. They don't want to do it. I know why people don't like to go face to face, because they're afraid of the no. But what they forget is that they still bring in those same kind of feelings, even in a dinner, a large scale event, even though someone is not going to necessarily say no face to face. When you only get a few responses, that's essentially your no. So it's a lot easier to not say anything at all and not get it than say something and not get it.
Well, let's talk about the third thing. So the third thing is that they do ask for money, but they don't actually collect. Now, what do you mean by this? Why would you ask for money and not collect?
That's that whole follow-up mindset once more, is that they will say, here's our need, here's the opportunity, but it's like people will just know what to do. That's their mindset. The people will know enough based on what you've said, where to put the check and how to make it out and how much to make it out for. It really is. It's just who to give the check. It's just mind-boggling, and they just don't think about it. And every study, every statistic, and my life experience, 40 years, I've seen that you have got to explain every detail with people. And I will have people say to me, Jim, I feel like you're talking to some of these people as if they're children. And the answer is, well, you know what? Yeah, we do. We do need to speak to them at like maybe they're a third grade level, because every study and statistic said that you cannot take for granted that people know exactly what to do. You need to say, please take your pen, pull out your checkbook, put the amount on the checkbook, make your check payable to crew, put it in the envelope with the response device, and put that envelope in the big envelope, and our table host will hold it up and we'll collect the envelope. You need to explain that to them. And I know that they're like, oh, you're speaking to people like kids. No, we're not. We actually need to be explaining, because if we want them to get it done, that's what it's going to take.
Well, I mean, what's the alternative is you have some horror stories before you did that, where people would just write checks and leave them on the table. And then what happens after that?
Well, yeah. And of course, when you've got 250, 300, 600 people in a room, and all people are doing is either leaving checks or leaving the response envelope on the table. Well, typically what happens immediately after the event ends, the hotel staff descend on the room and they're cleaning every piece of china up. They're picking the pieces up, and they're picking up paper, any paper. They don't know the difference between a program, a scrap of paper, and a giving envelope. So I am constantly having to weed through some of those kinds of dinners.
You've literally dug through trash cans, picking out giving envelopes.
Even in the best dinners, I've had to do that. Even in some of my own dinners, I've caught envelopes in the trash cans where the serving staff. So that's even when we've done everything, we found that.
Wow.
But it just, in the events where they don't explain, it's 10 times worse.
Okay, so that's the third thing.
Right.
The fourth thing is that they ask and they collect.
Right.
But they don't ask specifically.
Jason, I will have to say that I've literally probably had 1,000 or more conversations with organizations. They said, I don't know why people aren't giving to us. And when I look, it all comes down to they aren't asking for anything really specific or of value. They really believe that if they lay out their budget, that is sufficient enough for people to want to give to that organization.
Wow.
And when you lay out your budget and you say it costs us $8,000 to run our organization, our pregnancy center, our human trafficking organization per month, all your people here is you want me to help keep the lights on and keep the doors open.
Mm-hmm.
And people will give you token checks because they feel
guilty.
They feel guilty, but they're not going to give sacrificial gifts.
Yep.
They're not going to give those large gifts you need because they need to be able to give something very specific.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking, Jason, about we're giving you an example of a couple dinners that do it this way.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm wrong to say that 85 to 90% of every nonprofit dinner
about right.
in the United States that I've ever been to has just
they haven't done this right.
They've done a broad appeal.
Actually, we have a dinner survey, and as we're going through this program, I'm going to put the dinner survey up on the screen. Just go ahead and scan that QR code because it's 14 questions that we ask, and if you are doing a gala or a dinner every year, there's a lot of nonprofits out there that do this kind of thing every year. Go ahead and fill out that survey because it's going to give you a score at the end of the survey and kind of compare, the kinds of things that you do versus the kinds of things we do.
Right.
One of the questions on the survey is, do you ask specifically?
Yeah.
And you know how many people say no to that?
Oh, I'd love to hear.
I think probably 90% say no.
That doesn't surprise me.
That's one of the things that we dock them for.
Right.
And they don't know. It's not that you need to ask specifically. There's a way to ask specifically.
Yes, right.
And we cover all that in our Perfect Vision Dinner mentorship program of exactly how to craft the appeal in the right way.
Yeah. Well,
so we're going to get to that.
If you mean, Jason, which I think you do you have to ask for designated money? No, you don't. One of the beauties, if you do your dinner right, you can get a lot of undesignated money, and you need to. But what happens is you need to be able to ask right for undesignated money because you can direct people in the right way. So in a way, we are talking about specifics, but in a broad way. Yeah. And I know that sounds kind of like an oxymoron. We really do teach you how to ask broadly, but in a specific way.
Well, I have an example story of a dinner I went to last year. I'm sorry to say, Jim, but they had a buffet. It was at a church gymnasium.
Right there, two strikes.
It was very much entertainment focused. They had the wrong table host there. They had the wrong crowd there. But to their credit, they did try to get up and explain why they exist.
Okay.
And they did do an appeal.
Okay.
But she didn't have a specific goal.
Okay.
And she didn't really ask specifically for anything.
Yeah.
So even though we knew generally kind of like what they're trying to do, and we were aware of this organization and their mission and their values, so we wanted to support it, even though she didn't really ask specifically, but it would have been so much better if she said, you know, we're trying to raise $30,000 to reach this many children. And we believe that we can do that by having so many backyard clubs or so many VBS programs. And this is how we're going to do that. And for every gift of $50 or every gift of $100 is going to help us reach 5 children, you know, or something, right? Where you actually connect the dots, and, you know, now you're starting to get people to visualize like, oh, well, okay, that's something you know, and then asking specifically is starting to help people connect the impact that they can have, right? Yeah. And if you don't do that, and it's just like this elusive thing, then people just kind of, you know, they're reaching for their phone and checking Instagram and just seeing what's going. I mean, it's just like, when is this going to be over? You know?
Yeah. And, you know, Jason, our society, we're such a competitive society. Yeah. So not giving someone a goal, it makes it so vague that you get very little, if nothing, out there. So, So what's the next one, Jason?
Point number 5, which is similar to point number 4 in the sense that another mistake that people make is that they do ask specifically for things, but they don't give people a sense of how their money will be used.
Right.
You know, so like, for example, you could say, well, we need to raise, you know, $50,000 for an ultrasound machine, or we need to raise $20,000 for a new vehicle or whatever. Right. But they don't explain like why they need an ultrasound machine or like, what is that vehicle going to help you do? Right. So it can kind of just come across as like, well, we just need all this stuff. But they don't, but it's like, well, why? Yeah. What impact is this going to have?
Well, Jason, the term that I use a lot is outcome. What's the outcome? What's going to happen? What's the so that that needs to be filled in the blank in there? You know, if you're going to buy X amount of pregnancy kits, why do you want to do that? If you're going to send your staff to a training, so what? So that they can learn how to do XYZ better. And Jason, the bottom line is that everything we do needs to lead back to our audience, our clients, those individuals we're trying to get out of a life of human trafficking. If we're leading college students to Christ, what's the outcome? What will these things do that will make a difference in people's lives? Right. Jason, so one of the things that I learned early on, a great example that just always said what we needed about ultimately getting back to the person. Yeah. When I lived in San Bernardino, California in the 1980s, Campus Crusade had a hotel. Yeah. And we had grounds crew, and our grounds crew used to have to raise their own personal support. Now, if you think it's tough raising money to be a missionary sharing Christ with people overseas, you imagine how difficult it would be to have to raise money to cut grass. And that's really the way that they were selling it for the longest time. Wow. They were saying, please give me money so I can make the grounds look nice at the headquarters. Well, they struggled with that. And we worked through and helped them reframe their approach. We really focused not on the grounds crew, we focused in on the results. We knew that our hotel had thousands of conferences every year. Hundreds of thousands of people were coming to Christ every year at those conferences. Those were having an incredible impact on people's lives. And I can tell you this 100%, that if they came on the grounds and the grass was 3 feet high and the hedges weren't trimmed and there were no flowers and the place was in total disrepair, they would never rebook for that conference. And I know that the current conference would just have a negative impact on people.
Right.
And so we sold having a positive experience was the outcome. And the way to get that positive experience was through our grounds and maintenance crew. And that really helped turn around where they're at. And the same thing applies for our organizations we help. If we don't help them understand that what is the impact that this is going to have on our audience, that's how you get them there.
Yeah, it's so good, so good. Number 6 out of our 7 mistakes is, drumroll please, this one.
None of the two.
Number 6, the number 6 mistake out of the 7 is, and this one kind of blows my mind because out of all the things that we've been talking about, asking for money, actually doing an appeal, being specific, this one seems really obvious. But you'd be surprised at how many conversations we've had with people, even just yesterday.
Yeah.
The girl on the phone we were talking to was kind of thinking this way.
Right.
So the mistake is that they don't actually have a goal.
Right. Oh, yeah.
They're being specific. They're maybe sharing how their money could be used, but they're not actually saying, ladies and gentlemen, we're trusting God for $150,000 tonight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so the mindset, the reason why they're thinking this way is because they're thinking, well, if I put a goal amount on there, I mean, what if someone wants to write $1 million? I'm
going to limit their faith.
I'm going to limit God.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
And we did a dinner. We tried to help someone with a dinner last fall.
Yep.
They weren't exactly following our advice. They were kind of fighting with us on some stuff, and they didn't apply everything. And as a result, they did poorly. And one of the things that I believe is why they didn't do well is they didn't have a goal.
Right.
And I remember talking to them the week before. I said, what's the goal that you're trying to raise here? What are you going to say?
Right.
And they were like, well, what do you think we should say? And what, and we had this conversation with someone just yesterday where it's like, well, I mean, I want to raise as much as I can.
Yeah.
So why should I even have a goal?
Yeah.
So like, what's the problem with this mindset, Jim?
Jason, I don't know what the problem would be just asking people for all their money. Would you please just give me all the money that you have? That's not considered robbery at all in most countries in the world. But that's, I mean, we laugh, but that is the way, that's kind of almost the mindset, Jason. We are, as I said earlier, we're a competitive nation, and we want to not only achieve goals, we'd love to surpass the goals. So we want something to strive for and to shoot for. And honestly, by saying we want to raise as much as we can, you actually are limiting people. They actually will give you less. There's an old adage that says everyone's ask is no one's ask, and it's really the same way. An ask that's so broad will get you absolutely nothing. And so they're really hurting themselves by not having a specific goal in mind.
Well, I mean, imagine that you are a millionaire. You worked really hard to earn this money. Maybe you own a business.
Yes.
And you've got $1 million in your bank account. This is representing, your life's work or whatever.
Right.
And you go to an event.
Yeah.
And the person basically says, I want you to give you as much money as you possibly can.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how they communicate. I would be thinking, well, what are you going to do with my money?
Yeah.
Do you really need all my money?
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to use my money?
What it really says is, Jason, that they don't have a plan. And I sure am not going to give this something that doesn't have a plan. As much as I love the organization, I kind of coined the term pent-up giving. And there's a major ministry that I've helped over the years that just is a really tremendous ministry, and people just love to give to them, but they really don't give sacrificially. And until I coach them to give specifics, it wasn't until then that they just exploded. And the pent-up giving was the people wanted desperately to give to them, but because they weren't giving them a plan and letting them know, here's how the money's going to be used, here is what is going to happen with your money, those people were holding back. And I've had conversations with people. So this is not just speculation, but people said, I finally, for the first time with this organization, saw where my money's going to go. And I gave 3 times more than I've ever given before because I have specifics. And so that's so important.
Well, and I've done some online fundraisers with Reaching the Heart of Zambia. This isn't even in a dinner context, but I've done some online things where I've raised money for a truck, or I've raised money for digging wells or building a school building. But I find that the fundraisers where I say, we're trying to raise $20,000 to do this. And would you consider a gift of this? Or this will enable us to accomplish this. And very, very specific and very focused in. Those fundraisers do fantastic.
Jason, I may have this story wrong, but remind me, you were raising money for a truck and you were getting fairly close, but you had someone call you and they asked you a specific question. What was the question that they asked you?
Yeah, so we had raised about 20,000, so we had gotten about halfway there. And this guy came on the phone and he said, "Hey, I would really love to support your organization. I feel moved to give. How much more do you need for this fundraiser
to finish this off?" Jason, what if you didn't have a goal? What would your response have been? I mean, you had a goal. You had a goal of 40,000. You had a specific goal. He helped to meet the goal, finished your project, you were done. If you wouldn't have had a goal at the end, what kind of a response would you have had?
Well,
you wouldn't have had one, right? I mean, it's just,
I would have been like, well, I guess we're trying to get a truck, but we don't know exactly how much it's going to cost. So, somewhere between the area of 20 and 30,000, I guess, is generally what we're looking for.
And he would have
just said, well, you don't really know what you want.
Right. Yeah. Or call me when you find out an amount and I'll give you a check. Maybe. Because he was ready to write out a check or send a gift immediately then. Yeah. It's just,
I literally said 20,000. And he said, done.
Yeah.
Consider it done.
And so that's the beauty of being specific.
Yeah. And having a goal.
Right.
Yeah. So now one thing that we do talk about, and I don't want to get into this too much, but we do talk about having internal goals and faith stretching goals.
Right.
And so even with that, we have kind of a plan in place because people do ask us, well, there's kind of like what I need, and then there's what I'd like to have. There's ways that you can communicate that, with people during the appeal. And we kind of walk you through all that when we go through our course and how to do everything.
Well, Jason, I think overall where we're going here is this brings up a really great point. It's almost like they're scared to put a faith goal out there for people. They almost feel like, well, I need to make my goal really small so that I surpass it. And to be honest with you, you're really shooting yourself in the foot, because when you keep your goal small, small plans don't inflame the hearts of men and women. You've got to give them a goal to shoot for. If they can blow by that easily, if you say we need $65,000, nobody's going to write you a check for $30,000. If you inflate your goal to 130, 150, 200,000, and I'm just saying, when I say inflate, I don't mean make it up. No, I mean, how about broadening, expanding your dream and your vision? Have a bigger dream and put it out there. And don't be afraid to trust God for that. You know what? If I put a goal of 200,000 out there and I raise 175, when my expectation was that I was going to raise 100, I'm going to praise God, and I'm not going to go, oh, golly, God let me down because I only raised 175. I'm going to be praising God. I'm going to be telling people, you know what? God's given us a couple opportunities. And you know what? He got us up to 175, and I believe that he's going to get us the next 25. And so that's what we've got to do.
Well, let's move on to our final point. The final point, number 7, you kind of already alluded to this, but they do everything that we mentioned, but they fail to actually follow up with a thank you letter.
Oh, yeah.
Now, people might be thinking, well, what does a thank you letter have to do with an appeal? Actually, everything. Because of what you just said, right? Because you said, if I have a faith goal of 200,000 and I only raise 175,000, well, guess how you communicate that?
Right. Well, Jason, there's so much in this thank you note. And that's why, people always think, oh, it's just, I go out and buy a bunch of cards and I write. I'm more of a big fan of having in your thank you the reminder of what they committed to us. Let them know how much the goal was in the letter, so that if you didn't raise as much as the goal, it gives them an opportunity to give more to close the gap. Exactly. And to be able to get you to that goal. And also, too, it's one thing to get a whole lot of commitments, but the important thing is getting those commitments to be fulfilled. I have seen dinner after dinner after dinner over the years of people bragging, we raised this much, when you really only got that much in commitments, but then they only got 40% of the commitments fulfilled. So when you say you raised $200,000, but only 125 of that was fulfilled, you didn't raise $200,000. You had 200,000 commitments. So the important thing, and that's what this thank you letter does, it helps you fulfill, get those commitments fulfilled. So it's finishing the race. If you've ever been in sports or athletics, one of the things you hear from coaches is don't run to the tape, run through the tape. And that's what this is doing. The tape is we made a commitment on our envelope. The running through the tape is making sure that check-in or that gift is given.
Well, and this same organization that I mentioned before, where they didn't have a goal, they also did not send a thank you letter out.
Oh, Jason,
the next day.
I tell you, every time I hear those stories, it breaks my heart.
This wasn't one that we had trained. We were just kind of trying to help them on the side. This is the problem with trying to help people on the side, right? You want them to be fully invested, but they're not really fully invested, and so they just try. They like add little. I'll try this, but I don't like that. And really what we found is that you got to kind of do the whole formula, right? And that's why we put together our Perfect Vision Dinner mentorship program, because our Perfect Vision Dinner mentorship program is everything that we've learned about how to do a successful gala or a vision dinner. Is it's not about the appeal.
That's right.
We've had people say, well, I'll just do whatever I want to do, you just come in and just do the appeal. Right. And it's like, well, no, the appeal is a big part of it.
Right.
But the program and how it's presented is just as important as the appeal. And guess what? The venue is important as the appeal. And guess what? The meal. If you don't have a good meal, if you don't have a good venue,
impact your outcome.
If you don't do it in a timely way, even just things like the check-in experience at the venue. So there's all these little things. In fact, there's 239 items that need to be done.
And you can't just do 220 or 210 of those and expect to have the same results.
Right. So if this is something that you are kind of listening and you're going, wow, this mentorship program sounds really good, definitely check out this program. There's a QR code on the screen that you can scan, or you can click the link in the description below. But this mentorship program is something that's near and dear to our heart, and we actually offer it twice a year. So it's a 20-week program. Right. It's not just an online course with a couple videos that you just can watch at your own convenience. It's not even just a lot of videos. There's over 100 videos in this course, but it's not just videos, right? We actually have a structure. We have a workbook. We have weekly coaching calls. And so we are kind of like walking you through the process step by step. This is the formula. This is how you do it. We take time every week to make sure that you understand the content, make sure that you're applying it to your organization. And then as we get closer to the actual program, we actually help you craft your appeal. We help you craft your program. We help you with all the specifics. So this is why we call it the Perfect Vision Dinner mentorship program. And if you are interested in that, check it out. It's only available twice a year, and there are limited spaces available. So if you go to our website and you see that there's a waiting list, definitely join the waiting list, because it's growing and growing and growing, and you want to get on that list as soon as possible. So check that out. And Jim, any last words?
Jason, I'm tempted to give you one word, and that is ask. But I will add to that it's just so important. Don't cop out. Don't do all this work and effort and not go through the finish line. Don't be afraid. Just step out in faith and present the opportunity and the power of the Holy Spirit and leave the results to God.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining us on this episode of the Fundraising Masterminds. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments below because we would love to hear from you. Let us know which ones you're doing or which ones you haven't done or any mistakes that you've made in an appeal. Share some funny stories. We'd love to read them and connect with you. And again, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, whichever one you like to listen to. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Take care.